My name is Steve Sellers, and my wife Jamie and I have been coming to Front Range for just under 3 years right now since we moved to Castle Rock from New Jersey. April of 2017, I returned home from a 4-day trip and it was late. I got home about midnight, and Jamie, my wife, was still up in the kitchen, and that's kind of unusual for her. So I thought, what are you doing up? She said, oh, nothing, just cleaning. I don't know, what are you really doing up? She said, well, Mitch, that's my, at that time, 22-year-old son's gonna give you a call. So Mitch called me and said that he had taken his girlfriend to the hospital that day, and she had delivered a premature baby boy at 24 weeks premature. The next morning, we packed up and drove up to the NICU, and were able to meet Oliver for the first time. And he was small and vulnerable and lots of tubes in him, but he was beautiful. I ended up going on another trip a couple weeks, maybe a week later, and when I was in Chicago at a layover, and Mitch called me, a little upset. He said, I said, what's going on? He said, well, they took Oliver back for some tests, and he has what they call bilateral schizencephaly. And what that means is large portions of his brain were not developed. They just weren't there. So things like motor skills, speech, hearing, cognitive ability, there really was nothing there for Oliver. Over the next few days, they had some consultations with neurologists and doctors and this kind of thing, and they made the excruciating decision to take Ollie off of life support. On May 7th, we drove up to New Haven, and over the next several hours, they took Oliver off of his machines, and then several hours later, he passed away. We were in the room waiting, and I saw a figure pass by, and Jamie said, that's Mitch. And we just heard this guttural scream. And so Jamie said, go get him. I ran after Mitch. He ran down the stairs, just in his grief and his pain, just trying to run. At some point, he stopped. And I remember we were in the middle of a busy intersection, and I approached, and he just stopped, and he was just sobbing. So I just approached nice and slow, put my hand on his back, and then he just turned into me and hugged. And we cried for like an hour, it seemed like. But I just kind of gently led him back to the hospital. And we eventually returned back up to the same waiting room, and they had taken Oliver and cleaned him up and given him to the family. And so we were able to hold him, look at him, and see his fingers, his toes, and his face. It was a special time. One of the more difficult parts was that I am a father, and I know what it's like to have a baby boy. And I can imagine what it would be like to lose that, to have it for 3 or 4 weeks and then lose it. And so my heart just went out to him, because I've experienced the joy of being a father, and to watch him experience the loss of that was painful. God is my Heavenly Father, and I'm Mitch's father. And so when God, our Heavenly Father, sees us grieve, I was able to see, as a father, see my son grieve, and to speak into his pain, and to walk with him through the pain, the same way that God speaks to us through our pain. You know, not understanding why something like this had to happen, and having to deal with that, like, what's God doing, and why did he allow this to happen? To somebody as innocent as Oliver, who didn't do anything wrong. You know, why Oliver? And you just have to work through faith into those things. You can't always have those answers. I may never know why these things happen. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, God's good.